good afternoon or good morning, maybe depending on where you're listening to us from today. But I want to thank everybody for attending today, our live seminar, our webinar we're having. We have a guest host on today. We're going to be talking notes with the Cashflow Chick, and we'll be bringing on Paige Panzarello here in a few moments, and to talk, really give us her view, her expertise on investing in notes and kind of the ins and outs. Have some prepared questions already for her, but for those of you who are listening live to the webinar today, I encourage you to ask some of your own questions, and you can do so by simply typing your questions into the chat box on your screen. So as we get into the presentation today and you have a question, either for myself or Paige, please type those questions into the chat box. We'll make sure we get those addressed. If you are somebody who's listening to the recorded version of the webinar, as we go through, jot down your questions, and we'll make sure that you have both my information and Paige's information if you'd like to reach out to either one of us to get some answers to your questions on the material we're presenting today. My name is Scott Maurer. I'll be the moderator and host of today's webinar. I've been with Advanta IRA for over 12 years, specializing really now in the area of business development for our company. I started out initially handling a lot of transactions. In fact, handled a lot of different note transactions, people buying and selling mortgage notes, either creating a new note or maybe buying an existing note using their IRA accounts. I did that kind of when I originally started with Advanta and transitioned over the years into doing more, focusing more on the business development side of things, teaching classes, hosting webinars, etc. And that's obviously what we're doing here today. Now, just a quick background on Advanta IRA. I'm going to talk a little bit about Advanta for those of you who are on the webinar or listening to the recording who are not familiar with what we do. Advanta IRA, we are a self-directed retirement plan administrator, and we have clients all over the nation. We really focus on providing great customer service, experience in our administration of self-directed IRAs. The only thing we do at Advanta is to hold individuals' retirement funds, whether that's an IRA or maybe an old 401k, and then invest those funds at that client's direction into various types of self-directed investment vehicles, which we'll discuss a little bit on today as well. Now, a quick disclaimer, just Advanta IRA, its employees do not provide any legal, tax, or investment advice, and we don't endorse any products. We're not affiliated with any other companies, including anyone who may be on our webinars or seminars as a guest presenter as well. We provide a lot of, what we try to do is provide this as an educational vehicle for you to get some information. If you need to talk with an attorney or an accountant or financial advisor, we can certainly maybe refer you to someone familiar with self-directed IRAs, which is some kind of advice we're not going to be able to give you at Advanta. Now, we do a lot of times in talking in our seminars and webinars get into some legal and tax issues. We just can't give you advice on how to proceed, give you the pros and cons maybe of your different options. So again, a little bit about Advanta IRA. We are, again, a self-directed IRA administrator. That's the only business we do here at Advanta IRA. We have over $1 billion in assets under management for our clients and over 5,800 active accounts. What we've tried to focus on at Advanta really is the experience for the client from a personal service standpoint, and really honing in on giving you that one-on-one feel with a particular account manager, someone here at our office who knows you and knows your account. You're not calling into a 100 number each time, and kind of have this little chart to really illustrate a little bit about how an Advanta IRA is different from other custodians. Again, with Advanta IRA, you're getting a dedicated account manager. You'll have their direct contact information. They're the only person working on your particular investment or your particular account. You're not calling into an 800 number and getting a different person each time. We also offer, as obviously what part of today is, free educational offerings, whether that's a webinar or seminar. We like to bring in guests, like we've done today, talk about a variety of different topics as well. And all of the education we provide, whether it's the online webinar that you're listening to today or one of the live seminars, if you come to one of our classes in either our Tampa or Atlanta office, they're all free. Other companies obviously charge. They do weekend seminars where they charge you an admission fee. We have two options for our fee structure. A lot of companies only have one, so we try to have our fees kind of can work whether you're putting a lot of money into one asset or whether you're doing a lot of different assets, giving you some flexibility on the fees as well. And our people, I can't speak to the makeup of other custodians and their employees. All I can do is speak to the quality that we have here at Advana IRA. We have several individuals, including myself, who are certified IRA service professionals. I myself am also a licensed attorney as well as our owner. Again, we don't do legal work for Advana clients, but that is our background. And we have a number of people with accounting and financial backgrounds as well. So again, this is what you're getting when you open up an Advana IRA account. Now, a little bit just again about basic self-directed IRA information before we bring our guest host on to talk about note investing. For anyone on the call who hasn't heard of a self-directed IRA before, a lot of times when people first learn about Advana, learn about self-directed IRAs, one of the questions they ask us is, why haven't I heard about this before? Why didn't I know about this in the past? The common reason is that most IRAs, most 401k plans that individuals have are held with a bank or a brokerage firm who is offering them investments only into the products that they sell. So if a brokerage firm company sells mutual funds, that's all you're going to have as an option to pick from as far as placing your money into an investment. Same thing with a bank. You might get offered a CD or a money market account. A self-directed IRA is different because IRS regulations really allow for a much broader range of investment. It's not the individual company deciding what you can and can't do as far as a rules perspective. It's only that company deciding we're going to hold these assets because that's how we make our money. We sell mutual funds or we sell CDs. IRS regulations will allow you to invest in a wide variety of assets. They don't limit you in that respect only to a few different items. So it's up to each individual custodian to decide what they'll hold, and that's where Advana comes into the picture. We hold those alternative assets that a bank or brokerage firm simply is unwilling to hold. Now, the types of accounts that can be self-directed, your traditional IRAs, a Roth IRA for individuals. If you're self-employed, you could open up a SEP IRA, a Simplified Employee Pension IRA, a simple IRA, or even a solo or individual K plan. We also deal in health savings accounts, and basically any former employer's plan can also be self-directed. So if you're looking at your portfolio statements and it has the designation of an IRA on that statement, you can undoubtedly self-direct those funds if you wish. Again, same thing with any former employer's plan as well. The only type of an account you can be limited to using in a self-directed capacity is any current 401k or any current plan that you have through an employer that you're still working for. They can place restrictions on you moving those funds. But once you leave employment, the former employer's plan, that money can certainly be rolled over into an IRA account. So we do a lot of other seminars and webinars and trainings on the different types of IRAs and some of the other investment options. So if you'd like to get some more information on that, check out our YouTube page or maybe just give me a call. I'd be more than happy to go through those questions that you have. Now, if you do have an IRA, you do have an old 401k, and you're looking to move that money, at least a portion of it, to self-direct, there's two ways you can move funds. You can either do a transfer from one IRA to another. It's a non-taxable movement of money from one custodian to the other. It can be done in partial amounts. So if you're looking at self-directing as an option, you can move over just a portion of what you need to make a particular investment. So a transfer is typically IRA to IRA from one custodian to the other. Direct rollover is typically from an old 401k or an old 403b plan over to an IRA. And again, both transfers and rollovers are non-taxable events, and they can be done several times a year. As far as which way you would go transfer or rollover, that's what we help you out with when you get your account set up, in letting you know exactly what what the process is going to be to move those funds over. Now today, and with today's guest host, we're talking a lot about paper investing. We have people who have self-directed IRAs invest in real estate, buying rental properties, rehabs. They invest in private hedge funds and other types of private placements. But we see a large number of people investing what we kind of consider to be paper assets, where the investment that your IRA is making is in a document. For instance, your IRA making a mortgage loan, whether it's a balloon note, a conventional note, whether you're doing some joint venturing or equity participation, your IRA is lending money to some third party. They are signing over a promissory note and or a mortgage to your IRA account. So the investment isn't in the actual structure of a building or the dirt in the ground. It's just simply in this actual piece of paper. Now the piece of paper might be backed by a piece of real estate as a mortgage loan, so you have some security, but the loan itself is a piece of paper. So we hold a lot of different type of paper assets, including tax liens, unsecured notes, and what our guest host is going to talk a little bit about today, non-performing notes as well. Now, if you're investing in loans using your IRA account, what I think is one of the attractive things about making and originating loans from your IRA is you get to act as the bank. Your IRA is the bank, your IRA is making the loan, and therefore when it comes to setting the terms, how much you're going to loan, how much is going to be borrowed by your borrower, the interest rate, the length of term, how long is this loan going to be out for, when does it mature, whether there's any equity participation, all those terms that go into making a mortgage note that you would typically go into a bank and have them dictate to you. Well, if someone's borrowing money from your IRA, you get to set those terms and then dictate to them what that mortgage loan is going to look like. And some of the benefits then of private lending, one, obviously we just discussed, getting to act as the bank and determining the terms, and you can then hopefully set the rate at which your IRA is going to grow. If you know your money is all lent out from your IRA account at a certain interest rate, payments are coming in regularly, then you know exactly what your IRA is earning on an annual basis. There's also can be less liability in simply owning a note rather than owning actual real estate in the IRA. And it also is a very low maintenance asset. If you own real estate in your IRA or you're a landlord, then you need to, you're dealing with the tenants and making sure they're paying rent. You're also dealing with your contractors to make sure the maintenance items are getting fixed, which again, some people are fine doing and it works out well for them. But for others as well, they like the fact that a mortgage loan can be a very low maintenance asset. You just sit back and make sure that that loan payment comes in each month. We have one of my clients that I have a good relationship with calls it mailbox money at times. The check just shows up in the mailbox and gets deposited to his account. So today's, again, that was kind of just a very brief overview of self-directed IRAs, lending within an IRA account. To learn more, you definitely want to go to our website, go to our YouTube page, find other recordings of events that we have to really gain some more information. But today's presentation is really to bring in a guest. Paige Panzarello is the Cashflow Chick, and she's been a real estate investor and entrepreneur for over 20 years, specializing at times in both residential and commercial real estate, tax liens and tax deeds, non-performing notes, and she's conducted over $150 million in transactions over that 20 years. She's a founding member of the Women's Real Estate Network. She's got 2 websites here that you can visit her on, and Paige has graciously agreed to come on today and share, again, some very basic information on getting started in note investing and kind of things you need to know with the terminology, and also maybe even getting to a slightly more advanced strategy as well. So hopefully everybody on the webinar today will get some great information. Without further ado, Paige, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on.
Great. Well, Paige, if you can, before we get into the questions, why don't you tell everybody else a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you for the intro. I appreciate it. As you have said, and it shows on the webinar here, that I have been a real estate investor for over 20 years, and I was actually thinking about it the other day, and it's close to 25. I can't believe that, but time has flown. As you said, I've been in just about every facet there is in real estate investing. I started my career at a very young age by default. I had a family member that passed away, and all of the assets were located in Arizona, and so I was thrown into the deep end of the swimming pool of real estate investing without knowing anything about real estate investing. We had 38 townhome units, and that's how I started my career, and they weren't doing well. So I went out to Arizona not knowing anything and tried to make a go of these 38 townhome units. Long story short, and I say we, my family and I, ended up turning that around. I turned it around and put it in the black because it was operating in the red. And we owned a sewer treatment plant, believe it or not. I know more about sewer treatment plants than I ever did want to know. And we owned some land. And I realized, that I really had a knack for real estate investing once I got my feet wet and started to really understand the process. And I decided that I wanted to build on that land. And so I took the company, we hired some contractors, and realized very quickly that they were taking advantage of me. So not knowing anything about construction, I decided to start my own construction company. I was a bit bolder in those days. I grew very, very fast. I brought on a qualifying party, and we started really rocking and rolling. We held all of our licenses, including just about everything except HVAC and roofing, and the reason that we didn't have those is because the liability insurance was way too high. We grew very fast. We grew to 36 employees, and this is in the early 2000s, so you can imagine, how busy we were. And we were really building a tremendous amount. We built commercial properties, our own properties, residential properties, custom homes, PUDs, you name it, we built it. And then 2007 happened. And everybody knows, they've heard the horror stories, and I saw that 2007 was coming. And I was very fortunate because I had a lot of liquidity and I had a lot of assets, and I really wasn't leveraged at that point. I only had about 10% of my holdings that were encumbered. So I thought, this is not going to happen to me because I'm only 10% encumbered, and I had these great relationships with my lenders. And I was wrong. 2007 really happened on my head. And I was very fortunate because I was able to liquidate everything, and cash was king at that point, as you know, Scott.
Yes.
So, I was able to sell everything off at a fire sale price. I paid off all of my investors. I paid off all of my vendors. I did not have to go the bankruptcy route. But at the end of the day, 3 years later, I walked away with $0 in my pocket, having lost $20 million. And I tell that story for two reasons. Number one, it really shapes you as an investor. It shows you what to look for if you're going to, you need to determine what your what is. So when I came back into the real estate investing space after, just a little while, taking a little break, understandably, when I came back into the investing space, I was looking for something very specific. And that was, I really wanted to invest my time and my money in something that I considered controllable and something where I can mitigate the risk. Those two things are really, really important to me as an investor, okay? And I often, when I talk with people, I say, determine what your what is. Because if you need chunks of cash and you want to grow your self-directed IRA and you need chunks of cash, perhaps the buy and hold strategy of rentals is not the way you want to go. That's a longer-term play, and it's monthly cash flow as opposed to chunks of cash. And the reverse is true. If you want just a steady stream of income, perhaps don't go into a fix and flip situation because that's short-term and it's a chunk of cash instead of monthly cash flow. So I challenge people really to determine what your what is. The other reason that I tell people that story is because I want people to know that there is the possibility of a comeback. It's in your mindset, okay? It has made me stronger. I've come back into this space. When I came back into real estate investing, I was doing a lot. I was doing tax deeds and tax liens. I was doing fixing and flipping. I had some multifamily properties going on and a few other things. So, I really refamiliarized myself with a variety of different real estate strategies. And then I landed in non-performing notes. And for me, angels sang. And the reason that I say that is because there is a tremendous amount, and we'll talk about it, but there's a tremendous amount of control that you have when you are the bank. Like you were talking about earlier, if you're private lending, you set the terms. So there's a tremendous amount of control in this space, and if you do things well, you can really mitigate your risk. And I know we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that's, a little bit about me and why we're here. So I feel stronger and better than ever, and, I'm excited every day when I turn on my computer and I pick up the phone. So
Great. No, that's great. That's a great story, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call or listening to the recording may have hopefully similar things that they've, I know that the downturn in 2007, 2008 affected a lot of people. So obviously it's good to hear the stories and the people that were affected by it and bounced back and continued to play in the real estate game as opposed to just walking away.
Sure, absolutely.
So Paige, we had you on today to talk a lot about notes, and again, this is a very basic first question, but just to kind of maybe establish, get everybody on the same page, maybe explain a little bit, kind of maybe even in your own words, what are notes, and what type of different notes can you buy?
Absolutely. So basically, a note is a debt instrument. It is a promise to pay. And there are different types of notes that are secured notes, meaning that there's a piece of collateral of some sort attached to them, a car, a house, a piece of jewelry, any of those things are secured notes. And then there's unsecured notes, things like a credit card. Every time you sign that it used to be the piece of paper, but now it's the pad. Anytime you sign that pad, you're promising to pay the bank back for that credit card charge. So there are a variety of different notes that you can buy, secured, unsecured, performing, and non-performing, and we'll talk about those differences in a moment. It's really just a matter of where your comfort level is in the different notes that you might want to look at.
Okay, and actually just leads us to the next question, and I know a lot of, I think, an investment strategy specifically, there's people who want to originate mortgage loans and they get the 7 or 8%, they get a decent down payment, and that's their cash flow, essentially. Sure. But those might be more considered performing or at least originating notes. So one of the things you just mentioned, there are performing notes and there are non-performing notes. Maybe explain the difference between the two, and then also kind of the investment strategy behind both of those.
Sure, absolutely. So performing notes are just what it says. The borrower is actually paying on time every time. They pay their monthly payment as they promised to do by that promissory note. And non-performing notes are exactly that. They are not performing. They have the obligation, but life has happened. And a lot of the people that we deal with understand they're not necessarily bad people. They've just had life happen to them. God knows I've had life happen to me. And so, some of these people really just need a little bit of help. And when you're in the non-performing space, you're able to, depending upon your investment strategy, you're able to help those people to get back on their feet and perhaps become a performing note again. So the difference in investment strategies is you're going to build in a little bit when you buy a performing note. It's strictly for monthly cash flow. Okay, it's a long-term play. It's strictly monthly cash flow, and generally you're going to build in a little bit of appreciation or equity when you buy that performing note, but you don't generally get as large a discount. When you buy a non-performing note, you have the control to generate both chunks of cash and streams of cash. There's a little more flexibility and a lot more options that you have available to you in the non-performing space in terms of exit strategy and control. Again, you can generate chunks of cash or streams of cash. You can make it a short-term play or a long-term play. So that's kind of the broad strokes overview of the difference between the two.
Sure, and I'm sure we'll get into a little more detail as we go. And I would again encourage anyone who's listening to the webinar today live, as you have any questions pop up, please get those typed into the chat box on the screen, and we'll make sure that either Paige or I get to them as we go along. Sure. So I guess a lot of times I think, especially maybe for people who are unfamiliar with the performing versus non-performing notes, someone would say, why would you ever buy a note where someone's not paying on it? So for the average, I would say average Joe non-real estate investor not familiar with this, and say, why would I ever, those are bad notes, like you said, they're not all bad people, but the consensus might be this is a bad person, they're not paying their mortgage, they don't care about their obligation to do so. So why would you ever buy a non-performing note in the first place?
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? The reason that you go into the non-performing notes is because you build in a cushion of equity. Again, when we buy a non-performing note, we base our buy strategy and our purchase price is based on the securing collateral, meaning the house. I, by the way, only buy first position, and I buy generally secured by residential real estate. Okay, so first position, non-performing, secured by residential real estate. So the collateral is the house, and we do a heavy amount of due diligence. We'll talk about due diligence in just a moment. But the securing collateral is worth X dollars, and we buy the note based on a very discounted rate from the current market value of the securing collateral. So let's say the house is worth $80,000 as it sits right now. We will buy that at a substantial discount, which builds in a cushion of equity. Now, when you have that cushion of equity, you can mitigate your risk. You've now built in an automatic either profit potential or market stability into that note because, again, you're buying it based on a discounted rate of current market value. So no matter what the market does, you're pretty secure if you've bought that note well.
All right. Let's go to the next. So I guess just for example, what's your, I know each deal is different. What's the average percentage discount that you look to buy at? Is there a
Sure.
range at least of if it's to
Sure.
have it where it makes sense?
There is, and thank you for asking that question. Yes, definitely some pricing has gone up, just like everything. Everybody knows that our real estate market these days is pretty much at a peak. So pricing has gone up a little bit, but we generally will buy, depending upon which seller we buy from, we generally will buy our notes anywhere between 52 cents on the dollar to maybe 62, 63 cents on the dollar. So we will build in quite a large, as you can see, quite a large equity cushion. So we can pat ourselves. If there's a market change, we have that cushion built in.
All right, and kind of following up with that, so I guess in kind of continuing with that example, how exactly does the investor then make money on that non-performing note, and is there more than one exit strategy kind of in what you're doing with a non-performing note? Well, maybe share a couple of examples of what those are.
Sure, absolutely. So again, because we build in that equity cushion, that puts us in a very, very good position, no matter what state, no matter what the market does. All right, so that's already built in. One of the things that I love about note investing is that not only are there a few exit strategies, there's actually 23 different exit strategies to our avail as a non-performing note investor, okay? We generally do not use all 23. We generally use 4. But you can see the amount of control and how you can mitigate your risk when you've got that many different types of exit strategies that you can use to mitigate your risk, which is one of the things that I love. Now, the 4 that we typically use are the following. A reperforming note, and we'll talk about that's actually my favorite. We'll talk about that in a moment. A deed in lieu of foreclosure, which is basically the borrower says to us, because understand, when we buy a non-performing note, we actually do become the bank. We're not acting as the bank. We are the bank. So there's a lot of decisions that we have control over, okay? In a deed in lieu situation, the borrower will come to us and say, you know what, I'm just over my head and I can't sustain this house anymore, or I've had a horrible divorce and I don't want to stay in this house anymore, and I can't pay you off and it's underwater because, again, most non-performing notes that we buy are generally underwater, meaning that the amount of money that they owe is in excess of what the current value of the property is, okay? So they say to us, will you accept my deed to my home as payment in full for the money that I owe you for the note? And that way we don't foreclose. They want to avoid the foreclosure. Their credit can't sustain it, et cetera. And we will check and make sure, we don't just automatically say yes. We need to do some due diligence and make sure that there are no junior liens behind us, because if we take that house and that deed as payment in full, our loan goes away. And so if there are loans behind us or liens behind us, everybody moves up a step. So now we are the homeowner and we become obligated for the loans behind us. So we need to make sure that we do our due diligence really well and check and make sure that there's nobody in a junior position behind us that we are going to become responsible for. And sometimes we do take a deed in lieu if the liens behind us are manageable and if there is enough profitability in the deal. So don't be scared if there are junior liens behind you, but we just need to be aware of them. Okay, so that's deed in lieu. Everybody knows what a short sale is. That's just what it sounds like. If the borrower owes us more money on the loan, on the note than the house is worth, they come to us and say, I know I owe you $100,000, but I've got a buyer for $80,000, which might be the current market value of the house. Will you, Mr. Bank, us, take $80,000 as a short payoff? Well, if we've paid $40,000 or $50,000 for that note, what do you think our answer is going to be?
Yes. Absolutely.
Immediately. And if anybody on the call has dealt with banks on a short sale, the big banks, they know it takes 9 months, 12 months, 18 months to complete a short sale. How fast did I just make that decision? Very fast.
Yes.
Right. So that's a short payoff. And then, of course, foreclosure. Foreclosure is if we can't contact the borrower or the borrower is not willing to give up, or oftentimes borrowers have been beat up by these big banks and they stick their head in the sand, and because the big banks didn't listen, didn't care, and we just can't reach them, so we have to go through foreclosure. Or the borrower may be deceased and has no heirs. We have to go through foreclosure. So two things can happen in a foreclosure. We can either sell it to a third party via the foreclosure auction, and there's always an auction, by the way, regardless of whether it's judicial or non-judicial foreclosure state, meaning that a judicial foreclosure state is run through the courts and the auction is conducted by the sheriff, or the non-judicial foreclosure state, like California, is through a trustee. But there's always a foreclosure auction, and they do that because it prevents the banks, from kind of self-dealing there. It gives the general public an opportunity to purchase that home. So foreclosure auction, that's our least favorite, but it is one that is available to us. And then, of course, the reperforming situation, which is my favorite and my exit strategy of choice, where we actually work with the borrower. We can do all kinds of things. We can reduce the interest that they signed up for originally. We can extend the term of their loan and bring down their payments. We can reduce their payment amount. We can reduce their principal balance. So if they owe $100,000 and the home is only worth $80,000, we have the choice to work with that borrower and reduce it, reduce our loan to $80,000 and get them to start reperforming. It's called seasoning the note. Now, what happens in that situation, we've now generated, we require a borrower to come up with a small down payment, okay, which is what we call a reinstatement fee. It does not attack the principal amount that's due. So now we generate a chunk of cash, and then the borrower starts to perform. And they now have a sense of pride in their home again, a sense of pride in the home ownership again. And we've given them an opportunity to stay in their home and keep their kids in their home. And we're making money doing it. So it's a win-win all the way around. At the end of that investment strategy, we can either continue to cash flow it and we don't have the headaches of tenants and toilets, or we can sell it to another note investor for a slight discount as a performing note and reinvest that capital. So there's a lot of flexibility, as you can see, when we're talking about non-performing note investing and some of the exit strategies that are in our toolbox.
Sure, and Paige, a couple of questions popped up. Maybe address those now. In talking about foreclosure states, obviously probably being the least preferred method of exit strategy for a non-performing note. Are there any states particular that you like because their foreclosure laws are more favorable to the bank or to the note holder, and states that are you stay away from? Just maybe
Yes.
give us a few of each if you have them.
That's a great question. Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, I like states anywhere where the numbers make sense to me. I like that state. So, that's a broad stroke answer, but it's true. I follow the numbers and the deal. The deal has to conform to us. We don't ever, ever, ever conform to the deal. Now, that being said, I really do like, everybody likes the non-judicial foreclosure states because their foreclosure time periods are less. Generally, they're anywhere between 3 and 6 months in a non-judicial foreclosure state, and anywhere between 8 and 12 months, generally speaking, in a judicial foreclosure state. In terms of states that I like, yes, we like Georgia. Of course, we like Texas. We like Michigan, believe it or not. Michigan is a very fast foreclosure state. There is a redemption period, but often you can get that waived. So your timelines are minimal. So we do like those areas as well. North Carolina, Virginia.
Okay.
Those are some great states. In terms of not states that we avoid, yes. New York and New Jersey do not conform to our timelines. We generally like to invest in assets where we can exit comfortably within about a 12-month period of time. And New York and New Jersey, generally speaking, have foreclosure times that are in excess of 3 to 4 years. So that doesn't fit our model. There are plenty of note investors that are out there that do very well in New York and New Jersey. I just don't choose to tie up my money that long. That's all.
Okay.
Rhode Island and Maryland are both, well, Maryland is judicial, but Rhode Island is non-judicial, but very, very borrower-friendly, so we avoid those states as well.
Question, maybe we can tell me if you want to hold this one to the end, but someone asked kind of how a new note investor gets involved, or how can they get involved in purchasing non-performing notes. If you want to hold that till later, that's fine, or if you can kind of give maybe a little bit of broad stroke of how someone
Sure.
who's new to the business would even get involved in non-performing notes.
Absolutely. Okay, so 2 things. Number 1, your education in this space is paramount. If you do not educate yourself well, you're going to get hurt, okay? So that being said, generally speaking, if you educate yourself and start connecting with people, there are a variety of different ways that you can find non-performing notes. And like any real estate investing, there are 2 things that people look for. Number 1 is a deal, are the deals, and number 2 is money, because eventually everybody's money caps out at a certain period of time, and we'll talk about that later too. But Bigger Pockets is a great place to start talking to note investors and asset managers. I generally call them asset managers on the whole. We buy notes that are from banks directly. We buy notes from other note investors, hedge funds, brokers, anybody where the deal makes sense, we buy that note. So start talking to people. You can do that on Bigger Pockets. You can go to local RIA meetings. There are note investors there. Meetup has them, et cetera. And then, also online, just reaching out, talking to people who are in the space and asking for referrals. And believe it or not, this is a very collaborative space. Most other forms of real estate investing are very adversarial. They're very competitive. And while there is competition in this space, most people help each other that I have found. Asset managers will refer you to other asset managers, which is tremendous. So we'll get into a little bit more of that, but those are some broad strokes topics, broad strokes at least to give you some direction.
Sure, and I think kind of the next slide we had here, it just pops up, kind of you talking a little bit about that, what the process is to invest in and maybe purchase a non-performing note. Maybe touch on that a little bit, and kind of then tying back to that last question, where do you think most beginning investors struggle the most in that process?
Sure. I think that let's answer that question first because it's the easiest. Like I just said, 2 things that most people are looking for, first of all, is education. So they need to wrap their head around you're buying paper that is secured by a building. If you're or a car, they're secured by something, but you're building paper. So the process is a little bit different. So starting with that, your education, but deals and money. Those are 2 things, because when you invest in notes, You do need cash. There is no financing. Unless you are a $100 million hedge fund, there's no financing available to you unless you're talking to others, through private money, family and friends, people that, like you said, Scott, Advanta, that have self-directed IRAs or solo Ks, et cetera. But it is cash and carry, okay? So that's usually what beginning investors struggle with the most. In terms of the process to invest in a non-performing note, again, I cannot stress enough, you must educate yourself. Because if you don't know the questions, if you don't know the pitfalls, you will get hurt. That's a promise. Okay, so educate yourself. Don't just jump into it. Be very protective of your funds. You've worked hard for those funds, and be protective of them. Okay. Once you have educated yourself, then start networking. Again, bigger pockets. Network with other note investors. Reach out to whomsoever you've sought education. They will be able to help you. There are 3 stages of due diligence that we do when we first get a tape. Now, a tape is basically what the industry calls an Excel spreadsheet that lists all the assets that are for sale. Okay, it's called a tape. So we get a tape. We do an analysis of the tape, and we pick notes that we want to spend our most valuable asset, which is our time. We pick the assets that we want to do some due diligence. Now, there are, again, 3 stages of due diligence. There's 2 free stages of due diligence and a paid stage of due diligence. When you make an offer to an asset manager, and this is something I also want to stress quickly, in this space, reputation is absolutely everything. Everything. When you're in the fix and flip space, you are able to build in all kinds of contingencies so you can get out of a deal for whatever reason. When you go into this space, if you make an offer on an asset, you better have the intention of following through with buying that asset. And if you don't buy that asset, you have to have a very valid reason why. Meaning, if the value is not as expected, if there's a title problem, if there's a variety of different due diligence steps that we don't have time to go over today, Scott, but there's all kinds of different reasons that as long as you can prove that up to the asset manager, you'll be fine. If you just back out and disappear because you don't have the money, you will never get another tape. And believe me when I tell you, this is a very small space. All of these people know each other. And you will get a reputation, and no one will send you that tape, okay? So be sure that if you make an offer that you're going to perform, that you are actually going to close and purchase that asset. And if you don't, you've got a valid reason why. We check values. We check delinquent property taxes. That's part of the free due diligence. And then we do a couple of paid due diligence steps. Too many to list, but right now the basics are you order an O&E report, which is basically a title report that gives us a variety of different information that we need to evaluate in order to purchase that note. Once we purchase the note, we then put a team. We have a team in place, our loss mitigation team or our servicing team, and we hand the note off to them to deal directly with the borrowers. We personally do not self-service or don't do our own loss mitigation. We have a team of people, of professionals, licensed debt collectors that we pay to do that. And we do that for a reason, because they are licensed and the liability will then fall to them if a borrower contests a foreclosure and there's a problem in things that have been said. So well worth the $40 or $50 a month per note that you're going to pay them to handle all of that. And then you work it out to your exit. You work with the borrower to either get them to reperform, or you foreclose, or you do a deed in lieu or a short sale. And that's kind of the basic steps. And then rinse and repeat.
All right. Well, and obviously you get the process down, you get yourself educated, you have the cash to do it, and it works out well. But are there bad notes? So they're kind of notes that people should stay away from in this space. And maybe what are some characteristics?
I often will say that there's no such a thing as a bad note, but there is such a thing as buying notes badly, okay? If you don't pay attention to every single aspect of information that you are given from the seller, and those pieces of information you dig up on your own, then yes, you can get hurt. Your due diligence is very, very important. But in my opinion, there are no bad notes, but there are things as buying notes badly.
Okay, and I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because a lot of times it all depends on the deal and what you're getting out of it, and obviously knowing enough when you're going into the note.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
We kind of, again, you touched on this again, but maybe just reiterate kind of why due diligence is so important.
Right.
Not only that, there's obviously the aspect of performing the due diligence on an investment, but who are people that you would actually look to help you with the due diligence can be just as important as the actual due diligence performed.
Absolutely. And again, due diligence, first of all, the first question is hugely important. So why is due diligence so important? Due diligence is the process that allows you to mitigate your risk. I'm going to say that again. Due diligence allows you to take the risk almost virtually out of a deal. It allows you to mitigate your risk. So doing good due diligence and knowing what due diligence to do is hugely important, and that's why I say educate yourself. And I'm not saying go out, run out, and spend thousands of dollars on a guru, because there are some that are out there. I'm simply saying educate yourself to a place where you understand the due diligence steps to take, and then you take them each and every time. You want to make sure, we talked about a deed in lieu as an exit strategy. If you don't know to look for liens behind you, and you take that deed in lieu, and all of a sudden you've got a $30,000 judgment that is a lien against the property behind you, you're now on the hook for $30,000. So if you don't know those questions to ask, then you're going to get hurt. Okay. In terms of looking for someone to for guidance, again, the onus is on you as sophisticated investors. You might be beginning, but you're using funds that are not only your own, and especially if you're going to use somebody else's funds. Please take that very, very seriously. That is a huge responsibility, and so you want to make sure that you've got that down pat. And educate yourself. And there is education that's out there. Of course, myself and my team, we do a workshop, and we do it because there are people that are out there that want to do this type of investing. It's part of my give back. I want to make sure, I believe that there's enough for everybody, and it's very important to me and my heart for people to provide a legacy for themselves that they can comfortably retire, and that they have some financial freedom. Unfortunately, that has been lost in this country. So, really, if you're interested in my workshop, I'm more than happy to. On the slide before, it showed buildingwealthwithnotes.com. That's where you can find some information. You can go to cashflowchick.com. We literally, our workshop is 3 days. Hands-on. We teach you everything that you need to know. We give you our resources and our tools and our team. And we also feed you lunch for 3 days. And we practice. So, that I'm one of the options, but there's plenty others out there. If you're interested, you can also email me. You can email me at Paige, Paige, @cashflowchick.com, and I will send you some information about more, how you can educate yourself.
All right. Thanks, Paige. And we'll kind of continue on with some questions. We have about 10 minutes or so left today, so let's make sure we want to get through as many as possible.
Yes.
We've been touching on some of this already, so we don't have to spend too long on this question. But, you mentioned kind of where you can look for deals or find deals, but do beginning and experienced investors look in different places?
No. We don't. So finding deals is just a matter literally of opening your mouth. I mentioned bigger pockets. There are a variety of different podcasts that are out there that you can reach out to people through that. You can don't walk into Wells Fargo, by the way, and say, I'm interested, I know about this foreclosure property, and I want to buy the note. They're going to look at you like you have horns growing out of your head. So they don't understand that. But I will tell you that some of the smaller regional banks, I actually had one of our workshop attendees call me and ask this very question. And I told her, I said, you want to contact the corporate office of the bank and you want to ask for this particular person. And sure enough, she got a tape. So it's just a matter of opening your mouth and telling people what you're looking for. There are also conferences and symposiums and forums. Once a year, Paper Source, the Paper Source Symposium that is held in Las Vegas. It's terrific for beginners. So check that out. There's Note Investor Summit. There's the Distressed Mortgage Expo, which is coming up in September. There's a conference called IMN. Now that is a little more sophisticated investor. It's a fairly pricey forum, but there are a lot of asset managers that are there. So it's just a matter of connecting with people and telling them what you're looking for, and then, and go from there.
All right, great. It's a great resources, I think, especially for people, again, new or experienced alike to get there. And they kind of talk maybe a little bit about IRAs into things now as well, or starting to get into that. So you find a deal. What are some of your favorite ways to then fund it? So you found it, you analyze it. Hey, this is a note I want to buy. How often do you use self-directed IRAs? And then kind of what are some of the positives and negatives, maybe, if there are any, of using IRA notes for these investments?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so yes, absolutely. The self-directed IRAs, it's a perfect vehicle for most self-directed IRAs. There are, in terms of people that we partner with, I would say probably about 75% of them come from self-directed IRAs because it's a great vehicle as a legacy build, and it makes for a great joint venture. Now, and Scott, again, you're the one that's the professional in terms of the IRAs. I am not. But I have experienced there are some custodians that are out there that, depending upon the structure of how you set up your self-directed IRA, they can't joint venture. And so they're reduced to being, just a straight lender at a specific rate of return. Now, some people love that because they don't want to have to rely on whether a note is going to be profitable at the end or not. Some people don't like that. Some people want to build or need to build their IRA funds a little bit more. But about 75 to 80%, I would say, of people that invest with us use their self-directed IRAs.
Great, and I would just on top of that, as far as Advana as a custodian, our role has always been, for the client to direct us on the investment. Our job is to make sure that if you're investing in a note, you're making a purchase of an investment, that investment gets properly titled and that the funds flow properly from your brokerage account to Advana and then ultimately to the investment. So if you are somebody looking to do that joint venturing, or issue notes as they are, we've done all of that. So we are very familiar with it. It's just a matter for us of just making sure the paperwork is titled correctly and making sure you as the client approve of it. So as far as Advana, we don't have any restrictions from that aspect, acting as the custodian.
Yes.
All right, to get into a couple more questions, and again, I encourage anyone as we go through these last few slides if you have any other questions you want to ask, please type them in. I do have one more that we'll get to in a moment, but if anyone listening live, please get those typed in here as we get close to wrapping up. So why do you prefer non-performing notes? I think you've, again, probably given this answer already if people reading between the lines a little bit. Why do you prefer non-performing notes to holding rental property, and maybe the advantages and disadvantages of each?
Okay, that is a great question, and I could go on for an entire hour on this one, but I won't. All right, so advantages and disadvantages of each. Really quickly, the disadvantages in terms of notes versus rental properties. Notes, like I said, you need cash and carry. Rental properties, you need a smaller amount of cash, and you can generally finance the rest. Okay, so I would say that would be a, quote, disadvantage to notes versus rental properties. Advantages, again, I could go on for an hour. Everybody's heard tenants and toilets. They've heard horror stories about everything that from this, tenants putting concrete down your toilets, property managers being a nightmare. When you are in a non-performing note investment, you are the bank. So if the air conditioning breaks or the toilet breaks or there's a flood, they don't call you. Okay, they call the repair guy. We also do what's called force placing the insurance because we have a right to protect our investment that is secure, or to protect the property that is securing our investment. In a non-performing note situation, in the first position, that insurance pays you first. You're the lost payee. So if lightning, produces a fire and the house burns down to the ground, guess who gets paid first? We do. So there's a tremendous amount of control. We don't rely on anybody else for our profitability. In rentals, you do. You rely on your property manager being a good one. You rely on your tenants being good tenants. When you buy a non-performing note, you don't. It's great if we can get our borrower to perform, but we're still going to be profitable even if they don't. So we don't rely on anybody. And those are really broad, general strokes of what the advantage is and why I prefer non-performing notes. But mostly it's control and being able to mitigate risk.
Right. And I guess we'll finish up with this last prepared question. Again, anyone has their own question, please get it typed in here in a moment. In fact, maybe before we get to this question, we did have one question. Someone just asked whether or not you build Section 8, when your developer business, do you build Section 8 housing, and are they good for cash flow on the note side with dealing with Section 8 housing?
Okay, so Section 8 housing, again, keep in mind on the note side, we're not buying buildings and we're not developing buildings, and I'm not developing anymore. But I do have several colleagues that are buy and hold investors that build, they build and they put in Section 8. They are good for monthly cash flow, but the regulations that govern the Section 8 housing are an absolute nightmare from what I've been told. I did not build Section 8 housing when I was building. And as a note investor, again, that's more along the commercial lines. So generally, because Section 8 is generally buildings, apartment buildings, not just single-family houses, though there are some. And so I just typically stay away from those. Again, I've heard horror stories, but I don't have firsthand knowledge.
Sure. Someone asked, what percentage of the time that you take back property, I guess, either in a deed in lieu or in actually going through the foreclosure process? And then what's your exit strategy from there? I guess, do you just take back the property through foreclosure and then sell it as soon as possible, or do you look to sell or finance it going back and still taking back property? I guess we just give us a little bit there on how often you take back property and then what you like to do as a strategy going forward.
Okay, so great question. Thank you for asking that. So typically out of every 10 notes, let's say, about a third end up in a reperforming situation, a third will end up in either short sale or deed in lieu, and a third will end up in foreclosure. So generally speaking, 3 properties-ish we will take back out of every 10 in a foreclosure situation. Of those 3, perhaps sometimes 2 will sell at foreclosure auction. So we have now we just get a check and we reinvest. And if we end up as an REO, we have so many different options. We can fix it and flip it ourselves. We can put a tenant in there if you really want to do that. My preferred strategy, you could put another borrower in there. If the property just maybe needs a little carpet and paint, and we do come across those, believe it or not, and we're willing to do a little bit of that, then we can carry the note for a new borrower. We can carry the note for a fix and flipper. I have a very large network of fixing and flipping professionals, and anytime we end up with an REO, the first thing we do is we put it out to that network, and we can carry the paper for them. So now we've generated 2 streams of income from that same asset because we've done, we get the purchase price, we get our points, and we get monthly interest. So, just a variety of things that we can do. which is why I love note investing.
And I was going to say, and then we have the last question here.
Yep.
It just kind of ties into that. What's the most rewarding part for you, Paige, about being a note investor? Is it that flexibility? Is it the people that you meet? What do you find to be the most rewarding?
Actually, having gone through 2007, I know what it's like to be beat up. And so for me, the most rewarding part is when we get to work with a borrower and get them to reperform. I can't tell you that through our loss mitigation, we've had people that have written us letters that say thank you. You know, we've been in foreclosure and tried to modify our loan. You know, we had medical problems, whatever it was. And my kids get to stay in their home and go to the same school, and, you know, I've gotten back on my feet, and thank you for believing in me. So for me, that is the most rewarding part of being a note investor, is that we get to actually help people that people have beat up, the big banks have beat up, and we make a great profit doing it.
Great. And we have one more question came in. So what other funds, 401k, pension, can be used to invest in notes? And I would guess that's any cash that you might have, savings account, old 401ks, old pension funds. You can certainly roll those into a self-directed IRA, so you have that aspect. I'm sure you have investors who source their money from other people, actually borrowing it from others and then using that cash to buy the note.
We do that. There are people that use HELOCs. If they've got equity in their home, they'll use a home equity line of credit. All kinds of different ways, just as long as it's cash in some form.
All right, Paige, I want to thank you very much for your time. I think it was an excellent webinar, great information, and I know that everybody that was listening live got a lot out of it, and certainly the people that are going to watch the recording of this over and over as well to get that. And so the last slide here is my information. If you have questions on the self-directed IRA, how Advana is different, or maybe even how to get started, please reach out to me here at my email or phone. And while people are looking at that, Paige, just remind us again how to best get a hold of you or your team.
Yes, absolutely. You can go to cashflowchick.com, and there is a little button there that you can actually schedule a 30-minute consultation with me, so I'm more than happy to get on the phone with you and have a conversation, answer some questions. You can also email me, again, Paige at cashflowchick.com, Paige at cashflowchick.com. And we do have our next workshop is coming up in Orange County, California, July 20 through 22. And if you're interested in that, go to buildingwealthwithnotes.com, and that will give you a bunch of information on how to register for that as well.
All right, great. Paige, again, thank you very much for your time. And at this time, we'll conclude the webinar. I hope that everyone listening can join us for some other great webinars that we have, whether we're talking about self-directed IRAs or we're bringing on a guest to host like we did with Paige today. So, Paige, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate the time and enjoyed being here.
All right, great. And at this time, thank everybody again for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye.